by your teachers, by your tutors, by your mentors, by your friends, by your parents. But again, this is quite important. This we require a reiteration of this knowledge, that we have to set our goals. Again, what kind of goals, how you are going to set it, that we are going to discuss later. Reverse engineering, this is something which, of course, there is no such thing as reverse engineering in law. What I mean by reverse engineering is that if you know what is the meaning of reverse engineering basically, if I talk in very technical sense, in the engineering sense, if I have to know what is the technology which is used to produce a product. Let's say, for example, if you want to know how a mobile phone is made up, right, by the company, let's say Nokia is producing different mobile phones. You want to know what kind of mobile phones do they produce, right? How have they produced? What will you do? You will break down the technology. That is reverse engineering, which means you break open the things, you see what things, what ingredients have been used, how have they come up with this idea. You find out what is the chipset, and then what was the assembly. So this is basically disassembly. This was technical sense. That's what we are also going to do in our preparation when we are trying to solve any question. How? We'll see that. And finally, an exclusive slide on train your brain. There are some techniques, some exercises, and some tips through which you can stimulate your brain, and you can, retain the concepts better. You can retain the things for a longer time, and you can be more logical and critical in your approach while you're having your preparation. So let's begin. Very first thing, the SWOT analysis. I think this goes without saying. First of all, when I say that what is your strength, I'm talking about that where you are good at, right? First, you have to identify where you are good at, right? In fact, where you excel at. You can see that first of all, you have to prepare a list of topics, sections. If you see, the CLAT has different sections which you excel at and can answer correctly, and I should say with high level of accuracy, right? This is the way through which we will understand what is the hierarchy of difficulty of the questions for us, right? Certain questions will be difficult for us, certain questions will be easy for us, certain will be manageable. So that's what we have to figure out. So find out a list of topic sections which you excel at and can answer correctly. At the same time, if you want, you can also further dissect your lists, your topics and sections into further sub lists, subtopics and subsections. And for that also, like for example, if let's say I'm talking about general knowledge, right? So in the section of general knowledge, there is static, there is current. Then when we talk about static, there can be world capitals, or there can be abbreviations, or there can be history, there can be geography. So there are different subtopics, subsections inside the general knowledge. Now you can, again, amongst these you can decide which is good for you and where you do not, where you have to work more. So it can be history where you're good at, but geography you're not good at, right? So subtopics wise also you can prepare your list of where you excel at. And again, it goes without saying, keep perfecting the strength. So this is something which some of us might do, or many of us might do, that we at times, and many a times, this is kind of a silly mistake which we commit, that if we think that we have done, we know something already and we are good at, we move away from that and start preparing something else when we have time, especially when we have time, when we are preparing for a long time, when we're preparing for CLAT for a long time. We think that I'm done with this, let me move on to something else. So this is something which we this is a mistake which we commit. So again, don't forget to keep repeating, because again, repetition is required, right? You have to practice more and more. Now move on to weakness. Again, as I told, like strength, you have to find your weaknesses, right? Find out which the topic section which you're weak at. Again, subdivisions you can work. Now you have to work hard to make them attemptable, right? We'll discuss something more about how to attempt these questions later on, but you have to work hard only to make them attemptable for now, right? Then we move on to opportunities. Opportunities means those topics and sections where you are average at but you can improve. Now this is your task, this is your duty to convert these into your strengths, which means where you are average, you become master into it, right? If you're average in history, become a master of history. If you're average in abbreviations, become a master of abbreviations. Again, this can be, if you're average in logical aptitude or critical aptitude, then you have to again master yourself if you're average. So this is your task, this is your goal, right? What are the threats then? The threats are those topics or sections which you can't attempt correctly. More often than not, you commit mistakes. More often than not, I should say, you commit mistakes. Uh, there, you have to be more cautious. You have to convert these into your opportunities. When we say, and when we try to distinguish between weakness and threats, we have to know that weaknesses are more difficult, right? In terms of attempt, we have to make them attemptable. But when we talk about threats, we have to convert them into opportunities, and if they have already become opportunities, you can convert them into strengths. So this is a kind of cycle which we have to follow. So I hope you have understood till now. This is just the groundwork. This is laying the groundwork. When you have jotted down, and again, let me remind you, you have to take your pen, paper, jot it down. It's not something which you have to do in your head, right? Don't do it in thin air. You have to do it with proper planning. Keep pen and paper handy. Write down what your strengths, weakness. It might sound a bit more mechanical, more institutionalized, but this is the need of the hour. There's a lot of competition, and you should know what you're good at, what you're bad at. So note down, assess your SWOT, and then we'll figure out what should we do next. What is the next step? The next step is setting the goals. Right? You have to be smart. Right? When you're setting the goals, be smart. What do you mean by smart? Be specific. When I say specific, your goal should be very specific, first of all. And when I say specific, it also means that it can also depend upon at how many days you want to prepare, how much. Right? Maybe for 2 days, you want to make a preparation of only one topic, or two topics, or three topics, depending on whatever is your ability. That's why the SWOT will help us. If you already have conducted the SWOT for yourself, you get to know what can be your goals. If you're good at something, you need lesser time. If you are bad at something, you need more time. If you're average at something, you need little more, little less, right? A moderate time, right? Now, setting the specific goals, you should know that your goals, what your goals are, right? It should not be haphazard. You should know what you're doing, right? When you're sitting at a place trying to figure out what you're going to study, it should not be impromptu. It should not be something on the spot. You should always have something in your mind, in your paper. You should be very specific. Means you should be able to, towards the end of your learning session, when you sit, you learn, you should be able to measure it. How can you measure? Again, I think you appear for a lot of mock tests or some other kinds of tests, or maybe there are some previous year question papers. You can solve the questions relating to what you have just studied. It should be measurable, which means whatever you have studied, you should be able to quantify it, right? This will let you know whether you have perfected or whether you're towards perfection of that topic or not. It should be measurable, achievable. Don't make unrealistic goals. Don't be overzealous unnecessarily. Don't overwhelm yourself. Right. Always keep your goals practical. Keep your goals feasible. No need to unnecessarily put a lot of burden on your shoulders. Always be realistic. So it should be achievable. You should know your limits. Trust me, not everyone is having an extraordinary intelligence. We learn through experiences, we do hard work, and then we finally achieve something. Right? So your goal should be achievable. And lastly, sorry, second last, it's relevant. It should be relevant. Your goal should be relevant, which means that while you are setting your goals, right, it should not be something distracted. You should study. I mean, you are studying something. You should not be distracted, right? Your goal should be relevant. You cannot study a lot of things together, a lot of irrelevant things together without any order. You have to create relevant goals, right? It should be relevant to your study. It should serve some purpose in the end, right? Lastly, timely. Set time. It's very important. Again, it may be a very cliche thing to say, but you have to set deadlines, right? For two reasons, I say you have to set deadlines. One, it's put some pressure on us to finish something on time. Second, when you finish something on time, it gives you a lot of confidence. It's a big confidence booster, to be honest. And it will it will also let you know that how much have you covered in a given time. It will let you know what is your ability. I mean, how much can you finish within a given time, so you can make a long term goal. Again, for now, you should not make two long term goals. You should have immediate goals, with the larger goal in your head, that is, of course, your of course, cracking your CLAT examination, other law entrance tests. But your shorter goal should be, okay, for next 1 week, I'm going to study uh, mathematics or maybe GK, right? In GK, again, you may want to study current affairs. Again, you may want to study international affairs. So be specific. Then measure how much you have studied, right? It should be achievable, which means don't make unrealistic. Then relevant. It should serve some purpose, and in the end, there should be a deadline. I hope you're following till now. Now, when I say reverse engineering, this is how you can do the reverse engineering. First of all, teach to learn. This may have been told to you or may not have been told to you, but this is what I have always believed, that the best way to learn is to teach, right? The best way to learn is to teach. Uh, you might teach your siblings, you might teach your friends, your classmates, anyone, whoever is willing to learn. This will improve your retention power. Whatever you teach, you can only teach when you have understood the concept. And in the process of teaching, you will also understand the concept better. It creates a lot of psychological impact. It releases a lot of happy hormones in your body. And this will help you memorize and remember things more. Right. So it's always better to teach. So you can do it very easily. uh, you can have a buddy system. You can, whoever is your partner uh, in your CLAT preparation, you can fix time. Both of you do your SWOT analysis. You should know what is your strength, the other person should know what is their strength, you should know what is their weakness, they should also know what are their weaknesses. You teach what you know better, they teach what they know better. Exchange the thoughts, exchange the notes, exchange the learning techniques, and sit together, sit for a longer sessions, have meaningful discussions, share your knowledge. Trust me, the best way to learn is to teach, right? So this is one thing. I mean, when I say reverse engineering, you will, with the help of teaching, you'll also be able to understand what is the psyche of the creator. When I say creator, I'm basically talking about the one who is creating your questions, right? So you have to also understand the psyche of the creator. That's the next limb of this reverse engineering. First, you become a teacher. When you become a teacher, it creates a lot of psychological impact. It gives you a lot of confidence. It tells you that what you can do, what you cannot do, and you start thinking like a teacher also. It goes without saying. Best teacher would always be a good learner, right? You should not think that once you are a teacher you should not be a learner, right? So when you're teaching, it creates a lot of psychological impact, and it will help you understand the psyche of the teacher. At the same time, of course, you have to also understand the psyche of the creator. How do you know what is the psyche of the creator, right? There uh, there are a few things which you should be able to follow, because it's not an easy job. One thing which I always tell people, through which you will be able to understand the psyche of the creator, is to prepare the questions by yourselves. Pick any section. Let's say it's legal aptitude. You have solved a lot of legal aptitude questions, or maybe it's general knowledge, or maybe it's critical thinking. You know what kind of questions they are asking, right? See the pattern of questions, see how questions are prepared, what is the logic behind making the questions. What should you do next is prepare questions with your own brains, prepare questions by your own efforts, right? Give it to your partner, whoever is your learning partner. I just told you, you can have a buddy system. So give it to your friend, the same thing your friend will do to you. This will help you understand the psyche of the creator. What it does actually is that whenever a question is asked you in an examination, when you prepare a question on your own, you know the psyche of the creator. Automatically, it will be easier for you to understand what option should you choose, because you also know how to make options. Difficulty is not in the question, difficulty is mostly in the options, right? The creator does not make difficult questions, the creator makes difficult options, right? I can give you an example. In the 2017 CLAT, if I'm not wrong, there was one question particularly. The question was that before becoming secretary general, the secretary general of United Nations, what position did Antonio Guterres held? Right, this was a question. This was actually asked in CLAT examination before becoming Secretary General of United Nations. The current SecGen of UN is Antonio Guterres. Before becoming SecGen, what was he? I mean, what position did he hold? Everyone knew that he was ex-Portuguese PM. The very first option which they gave was Portuguese PM. People already have heard this. This information was fitted into their head that Antonio Guterres was uh, was prime minister of Portugal. But people already knew this, right? The very first option which they gave was Portugal, PM of Portugal. People, without even thinking whether this option is correct or not, without, because there is a lack of time, you have to do a lot of questions, it creates a lot of panic. So you saw Portuguese prime minister, a lot of people have done that mistake. My own students had done that mistake in the past, that they clicked that option, although the correct answer was he was the UNHCR, which means United Nations High Commission for Refugees. Even though they knew something about Antonio Guterres, they committed a mistake. Why? Because the options were difficult. So you have to also know that options will be difficult. So focus what kind of options are asked. Try to understand the psyche of the creator. You will be able to do it when you teach and when you start preparing your own question. So when you are studying GK next time, I will suggest, and when you're studying with your friends, what should you do? Create your own GK capsule. Put a notes. Always keep jotting things. Don't rely only on your Excel sheets or Word files or PDFs. Always try to use your own handwriting. Write things in your own handwriting. If possible, remember things in your own native language. It's always easier to remember things in your own native language. And then uh, prepare questions, give it to each other, right? Solve the questions. This will again give you a lot of confidence, and this will definitely help you understand the psyche of the creator. And this way again you will be able to remember things for a longer period of time. This helps actually a lot in your English, in your legal aptitude, in your GK, in all kinds of sections. I think now I'll move on to the mm, main topic which I want to discuss. First of all, find the perfect spot. When I say train your brain, right, you need a good study environment. You cannot study at a place which does not give you the vibe. Trust me. Uh, First of all, you cannot study in a dumpster. People may, people may have, but it's not ideal. Always find a perfect spot. In fact, there are some psychological facts. Studies have been conducted which will reveal that where you sit and where you study, you have a connection to that place, right? There are some magnetic fields, there are some energies around you. When you sit at a good spot, there should be good seating posture, there should be good neck posture, there should be good back posture, and you should have good light, right? You should not have a lot of distractions, you should not have a lot of disturbances. So that perfect spot should be there with you, then only you will be able to study, right? Lower your activation energy. This is something which I really wanted to discuss, and this is something very interesting. What is, first of all, activation energy? It's the amount of efforts which we put in for coming up to a decision or accomplishing any task, etc., right? If I can give you some example, right? This directly relates to procrastination. If you know what procrastination is, the habit of delaying. As a matter of fact, every one of us, or I can say most of us, are procrastinators. That is one of the biggest problems with us, which actually hinders a lot of our preparation. We procrastinate a lot, right? How to reduce this? Because when you procrastinate, basically you're increasing your activation energy. Activation energy means you're activating yourself to go and study. It may be for anything, right? There is a, I forgot his name. I think it was some Shaw. I forgot the name of the person. So mm, uh, he is a philosopher, and he is a psychologist, and he talks about activation energy, right? So he gives an example. Rather, he makes an analogy of sleep in your gym clothes. The people who go to gymnasiums, right? So these people are, he suggests that you should sleep in your own gym clothes. When you wake up in the morning, you feel more inclined to work out and go to the gym as compared to your cozy pajamas and cozy clothes which you usually uh, take to the bed, right? So this is a sleep in your gym clothes rule by Shaw I think Shaw, some Shaw Accor. I don't remember his full name.
Somebody said JB Shaw.
Sorry,
Is it JB Shaw? Someone
JB
just
Shaw.
suggested from the audience.
No, no, no. JB.
I just know George Bernard Shaw,
No, no, I don't
who's
think.
the
No, no, no.
playwright.
No, no, no. It's not GB Shaw. It's not.
Yeah,
It's someone else. Anyway, you can Google
yeah,
if you want.
sure,
That
sure.
is sleep in your gym clothes rule. That this reduce procrastination. This definitely helps you in lowering your activation energy. How to lower it? That always, if I have to suggest, uh, I can give you an example. If you keep your mobile phone near your bed, when you wake up in the morning, the first thing which you do is pick up the mobile phone, open Instagram, Facebook, something else, right? You try to engulf into those activities. But the morning you're looking forward to it, in fact, right? In the night, the same thing you could do. Try it once. Keep the textbooks near your bedside and keep reminding yourself in the night that when I wake up in the morning, maybe I'll look at the text. Don't think that you have to study to the fullest. Maybe just look at the textbook. This will help you procrastinate less, and this will help you lower your activation energy, and this will definitely help you be more productive, right? So one thing which I would always suggest, and there is also one more rule, that is basically 5 seconds rule. When some thought pops up in your head, do it within 5 seconds. Whenever it pops up in your head, do it within 5 seconds. Don't delay beyond 5 seconds. Otherwise, you'll procrastinate. You will not do it, because the moment you start doing, you get interest automatically. You will start, uh, studying, or if you are doing anything else, maybe playing piano or playing guitar, whatever you want, right? Because when we talk about studies, there is lack of motivation. Trust me. So when we talk about motivation, we should talk about this gland in our body. This is something physiological now I'm talking about. Earlier I was talking about psychological. Now I'm talking about physiological. Increase your dopamine levels. Now, dopamine is a gland. It is in our body. It relates to our nervous system. What does dopamine do? Amongst various other functions, it also helps in uh, increasing focus and increasing our uh, motivation, right? So this gland particularly relates to focus and motivation amongst other functions which this gland performs. Now, how to do this? Of course, there are good foods available. There are foods rich in tyrosine, if I have to tell you, which are almonds, banana, avocados. Those who eat non-veg, they can have chicken, eggs, right? These things will help you increase your dopamine, right? First of all, which kind of food you are eating, it's important. I don't know whether you were hoping to get to know what would be the food you should be eating in this session, but let me tell you, that is also important. So the foods rich in tyrosine, again, you should remember this name, you can google it out. Other thing which you should do to increase your dopamine would be exercise adequately. Listen to music. Trust me, music is a good stress buster, and it gives you motivation. Whichever music you want, but don't listen a lot to the sad music and the Rijit Singh songs. I think that will not motivate you. It might depress you. So I would suggest that listen to good songs. Maybe Kar Har Maidan Fateh again. No pun intended there. So you can listen to some good music, some motivational music. Then I don't know whether how many of you would be doing the next thing, that is meditation. Try meditation. It helps increasing dopamine level. One very important thing, we always think that we can burn the midnight oil and study hard in the night. Let's be the night owls and we can achieve anything. To be honest, we need a good sleep, especially in the time of night, right? The best way to increase your brain function is try to study in the morning hours, right? It's a good time because your brain is fresh, right? You have good sleep. Again, you should usually have 7 to 8 hours of sleep. Don't deprive yourself of sleep, and don't unnecessarily, break your head over Netflix and other things. In the night, you think that okay, I'll watch it in the night. Morning, I'll wake up late and I'll start studying. Right? This is not how you prepare. Always try to have a good sleep and timely sleep. Right? Again, I don't know how many of you would follow this, but it goes without saying that sleep is very important for increasing your dopamine level. One more thing, massages. Get massages. Maybe you can ask your parents to give you massages. This actually helps you in increasing your dopamine level, right? This is the physiological way to increase your brain functions, especially with regard to focus and motivation. When I say connecting the dots, what do I mean? Connect the dots. This is something which I always like to share. There are two things which I want you to do. One is with regard to your memory. Actually, both the things are with regard to memory, but one is purely with regard to memory. Second is with regard to the logic. One is when I say with regard to memory, you create a secondary memory, right? I remember when I used to study for CLAT preparation, I always used to have pictures in visual pictures in my head of my surroundings. If I have to remember something, I will try to remember what was I doing at that time, right? When you studied something, right, it's not possible for you to forget all of a sudden, especially when you studied it good enough. At a crunch time, when you're attempting your questions, it's possible that you might not be able to remember at that time, but it does not mean you haven't studied. It's not coming in your mind. Don't try to remember what is the answer, trust me. Try to remember what you were doing at that time. Try to remember what was near to you. Try to remember whether you were listening to a music. Try to remember whether you were making a coffee. Right. Try to remember at which side of your notebook was that thing written. Right. Always try to use your secondary memory. Don't remember directly your answer. Try to remember what you were doing, what was the surrounding, etc. So this secondary memory is definitely going to trigger a primary memory. Right. This way you can uh, mm, attempt your answers more in a more functioned way, right? Another one which again I like it very much, actually, you can create some foolish logic to remember things, right? I can give you a few examples, or one example at least. When I say foolish logic, again I'll give you from my own experience that it's difficult to remember good songs, but it's very easy to remember the bad songs. Even if you don't like the lyrics of the song, you can pick some Himesh Reshammiya songs. I am not going to embarrass myself by telling which songs, but I do remember them, trust me, even though I never liked them. So this is something which has happened to me. It happens to a lot of people. In my experience, I've seen this, that things which create some stupidity, things which are a bit foolish in nature, we tend to remember them, right? That's how brain functions. So create a foolish logic of your own when you try to remember things. Connect it to any logic, right? If I have to say, who was world's first prime minister in the history, right? The answer is Sirimavo Bhandar Naike, right? You can create any random logic of your own. Maybe you can connect that logic to some classmate of yours and try to remember that, right? Or if you have to remember the dates, right, you can try to multiply, add, subtract the digits in the dates, right? That way you might remember, right? So always try to connect the dots, one via the secondary memory that might trigger your primary memory. Second, use some foolish logics. I always say that whenever things are difficult, create some stupid logic, foolish logics of your own, connect it with your concept. It's very easy this way to remember things, right? And I would also say, while you're attempting the questions in your examinations, don't get stuck on a question. Trust me, if you have studied, it might come to you later. Move on. Most often, more often than not, you will come across another question and you will remember the answer of some question which you have left. Right? It happens. Don't unnecessarily get stuck. Don't be overzealous and don't try to overdo it. You should know your boundaries and limits. If you're not able to remember something as of now, move on. Whenever it's possible, at that time you're not able to remember because of the pressure, maybe looking at some other question or some other options, which happens more often than not, this will remind you of the answer of that previous question, right? Now this is something again very important, and you should do this once you are done with all the SWOT analysis and setting up the goals. Now by this time you should also be able to understand your learning level and learning style. Basically there can be two kinds of learning levels, that you can be a bit slow learner or you can be a bit advanced learner, right? How do you identify? You first see what is your score, take an average of your previous scores, look at what are the past cutoffs for your desired institution. If you feel that you fit into the cutoff, consider yourself to be an advanced learner. If you feel you are below the desired cutoff, consider yourself to be a slow learner, right? And keep getting motivation. When I say slow learner, does not mean you're a bad learner, which means you take your own time, right? Now what is your learning style? This is again quite important. Every person would be having a different way of learning. It can be verbal, right, which means some people may just read and write. When I say verbal, which means you just read and write, good enough for you. Again, it depends whether you're reading from a mobile phone or a laptop or your own handwritten notes. Read and write, good enough. Some people would be auditory in nature, right? That's their style of learning, auditory. They listen. Without listening, they can't remember, right? Some people are visual learners. They see things, right? It can be PPTs, it can be graphics, videos, etc. They see things and then they learn. Last one would be kinesthetic. Some people would be doing some actions to learn, right? They want more practical approach, right? This is more apt in science field, but this can also be used for law entrance tests. Now, what you should do is you should understand what is your learning style. It can be a combination of all of these. It can be verbal plus auditory or verbal plus kinesthetic, verbal plus visual, auditory plus kinesthetic, any combination, any kind of permutation combination you can do here. You'll get to know what is your own style, right? This you can do when you're done with the SWOT analysis or setting of the goals. Check what is the best way for you to learn. If you think that you want a combination of all four of these, have reading and writing handy. Always keep jotting down with your own handwriting. Keep a notebook handy. Never, keep. Sometimes people do only underline, but I always suggest that also keep your notes in your own handwriting. At the same time, listen to some audiobooks if you want. Watch some videos which will help you, and try to reflect upon and try to do something which is relevant to your preparation. If I can give you an example, one thing which you could do is suggest some legal solutions to people in your neighborhood. You do know a bit of law while you're preparing for a law entrance examinations. At least this much you can do. So these combinations are going to help you big time in your preparation. Now, there are some other things which I would like to tell you other than these tactics. So, first thing I would say that always keep taking notes. Then there is something which I always tell people. This is an activity which will help you in your English, which will help you in your critical thinking, and which will also help you uh, mm, in your overall preparation. Because ultimately, let's face it, all the examinations are in English, right? So you have to improve your English. So this activity helps you in reading comprehension. First of all, never read. We usually read our newspapers or news articles from our own continent, and we don't usually read things from outside of the world. That's our habit. What I would suggest: find a international or a website, news website of some other country. It can be Huffington Post, maybe. Find an article which is usually outside the area of your knowledge base, right? Now, what you should do, read that article, right? Summarize. This is something which I always suggest people to do. It's always easy to elaborate, it's difficult to summarize, right? I think it was Albert Einstein who said it once that you haven't understood it enough if you can't explain it simply. So, always keep things simple. If let's say it's a one big page article, reduce it to one or two paragraphs, summarize, and the crux should be contained in that paragraph, right? Then the next step which you should do it, read it, summarize it, and then find out the other side of the story. So don't read it as it is, whatever is written there. Criticize it. You have to increase your critical thinking when you study critical thinking and critical aptitude. It is important that you have to build your critical thinking. Trust me, you have to build, which means you have to ask questions. Why I'm studying this? Why government is doing this? Why there is an outrage about CAA? Why people are protesting? You have to have whys and whats a lot. Why am I studying? What is the goal? What is the purpose? Right? So you should always try to find out the other side of the story when you're writing an article. This will definitely help you in your comprehension. Face it, that whatever your reading comprehensions come in your CLAT examinations, it might sometimes become difficult because we are not habitual to reading those things outside our knowledge base. So psychologically, it creates an impact. What you should do, read something which you do not usually read. Find some articles from outside. This will definitely help you in your English reading passage, at least I can say. Then, when I say that summarize it, this will help you in understanding. Sorry, in creating your own. When I say summarize and criticize, which means it will create uh, a critical understanding of the subject, which means you are developing your critical thinking. So critical thinking is something which cannot be developed overnight. Right? It takes time. So that's why people usually falter in critical aptitude. I have seen with in my own experience, they do commit a lot of silly mistakes because it is something not fitted in their brain. It's not inherent. You have to develop. Please develop your critical thinking by giving your own opinions, criticizing something, so and keep discussing things amongst your peers, amongst your friends, with parents, with whoever you want to. Right. I think I'll stop here and. I thank you all, whoever was listening to me. I hope it was not too boring or too much to retain. I thank once again the team Losico and the Project Maverick and Miss Shweta and Anubhav and Samanika who all gave me this opportunity. I think we can have some time to have some kinds of questions which if already asked.
Yes, sure. First of all, it was really interesting. It was not boring at all. Yeah, and I'm sure they learned something new today. They've been reading too much about law. This definitely would be helpful. There's one person who was a bit more curious about. He said that I told him to go on YouTube in case we have time. We'll take this. Um, he spoke about. He wanted to know the joining the dots. If you could, what did you
Okay.
start with? What was the starting example? One was the song, but उससे पहले something before that you said.
I mean, I basically spoke about two things. One was that you have to use your secondary memory to trigger your primary memory. It usually happens that something is stuck in our head, but we are not able to remember it. Right. If you
I
have
use that a
gone,
lot myself.
sorry.
I use that a lot myself. I also use it. Primary,
Yeah,
second.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, for in my own experience, what I have done that I always try to remember what I was doing at that time, right? Because that is a secondary memory which is already fitted in my head. That is easy to remember because you're experiencing something, right? Something which you're deliberately trying to remember is different, and when you're something automatically which is going inside your head, which you're experiencing, it is easy to remember, right? In fact, you don't even have to make any effort there. So I'll try to remember what I was doing. Maybe if I'm making coffee at that time, automatically it will trigger my primary memory what I was studying, right, and what is the correct answer. So always try to remember what you are doing. Always try to remember what what were your surroundings, maybe whether the fan was on, who was sitting in front of you, or maybe whether it was raining outside, whether you were listening to a song. These kinds of things you might, I mean, there is no hard and fast rule. There is no one answer. It depends upon the person.
There is a question on YouTube, and it is, hello, sir. I want to study LLM. It is not really related to the topic, but if you want to take it, it is,
Sure.
I want to study LLM course next year, but I'm not sure whether this to study abroad or here in India itself. My interests are in the field of aviation, space, and IP laws.
You
And she
have,
says, when are the exams conducted for admissions for LLM course?
see, now because of COVID-19, I think exams are already pushed. So, and whatever the CLAT dates are, PG CLAT also happen at the same time. If you wish to pursue your LLM from India, I would prefer you can do it from any of those CLAT affiliated colleges. I mean, CLAT consortium colleges, all the analysis. Other than that, people would also go to the South Asian University, that is SAU. They might also prefer, I would say prefer, because it's a very nice institute. They have a good PG program, but it's something which is not into the persons who has asked the question to their domain. That is Azim Premji University. They might also look for TIS. They also offer LLM. If I talk about outside of India, if that person is interested in aviation, air and space law to be specific, if I can rephrase it from aviation to air and space law, then they might consider McGill University of Canada. Right, that is one of the better universities when we talk about aviation law. And again, when they have to do it in IP, if they're doing it from India, maybe they can go to IIT Kharagpur because IIT Kharagpur offers intellectual property right LLM. Then, other than that, from outside of India, there are many options. Whichever, I mean, it's a sea. You can go to Melbourne, you can go to Queensland, you can go to Rotterdam University. It's quite good actually. You can go to University of Oslo because if you go to Netherlands or some Scandinavian countries, you might end up getting scholarships, right? And you only have to pay for your accommodation. and your food and other things, other miscellaneous things, because many of these places you get 100% scholarship in your tuition fees as a matter of policy, in fact. So it's quite desirable to go there, and these countries definitely give you an edge over Indian institutions in terms of unique courses, right? There can be courses which relate to sports law, right? Sports law LLM, which is not seen in India, right? So exploring the avenues would be something which people might consider.
Fantastic. Very, very good answer. I'm sure Rashi would be very happy. Rashi Singh, who asked the question. If she's around, I think, Rashi, if you're around, I hope that answers elaborately. Great. Thank you so much, Ayush. I do not have any more questions. Anything, any takeaways that you want them to really, that this is the most pertinent point? Or
Uh, I
don't
don't.
forget this, like if you had to really say something like that.
Yeah, again, there is one thing which I always tell, because I don't know whether this was not part of the webinar, but there is one thing which I always emphasize upon, is that you have to be good in English. You have to crack CLAT. Trust me, you have to be good in English. If you think that you're not good in English and still you can crack CLAT, you can. I'm not doubting that. But the problem is you will be having a lot of problems. The whole question paper is in English. Two things again, if I can tell, if they want to really improve upon their English, usually people tell them to read, study from dictionaries and read newspapers, etc. There is one thing which I always suggest: try to listen to English songs, try to watch English TV series with subtitles. That's the best way to understand English. And again, usage definitely, I think everyone will tell this. English is important because if you don't understand the language, how will you solve the question paper, right? Many times people do have good brains, but they fail to give the correct answer. They commit a lot of silly mistakes while attempting questions in especially in legal aptitude and logical section.
And with
I
the
think
changing
English.
pattern,
Yeah, yeah.
a lot of reading in this pattern, the new
Yes,
one, a lot of reading for
yes,
every
yes.
section they have. Yeah.
And this, they have to read fast, and they have to at the same time read and understand and then answer also. So because it wastes a lot of time, most of the times I see in my experience, and people waste their time when they are failing in their time management skills, they don't know good English. I can say 70% of the students who are not able to finish it in time, or even if they would have, they are failing in English. Trust me, they don't have good English. That's, I mean, it's unfortunate. I'm not supporting that you should become some Anglaic person, but still, that's the need of the hour. So that's something which I always tell.
Might as well improve. Yeah.
Yeah, they should, in fact. Okay,
Good.
I think that would be
There
the end
is
of it.
one last question
Okay, yeah, sure.
from
No,
Kunal.
not a
Kunal
problem.
has been asking a lot of things
Yeah,
since
sure,
it started.
definitely.
So he says, how does the anxiety in brain affect the test taking?
Again,
Anxiety.
anxiety.
Effect of, he
Uh,
says, how does the anxiety in brain affect the test taking? I mean, maybe he wants to know how anxiety impacts his writing while writing.
Okay, I think if your question is how does anxiety affect, again, if you are anxious, if you have a lot of anxiety issues, definitely it's going to affect. I think I don't even have to answer it in this way. I would take this topic and drive it to some other tangent, and I would say that don't be anxious and try to have lesser anxiety. Again, I was talking about dopamine. It's something physiological, and people don't usually understand
Focus
it.
much.
Yes, but I would always suggest the reasons I told you: good environment, finding the perfect spot, and then increasing your dopamine level. Right, that requires a lot of physiological functions. Eat good food, do exercises, brain exercises. In fact, people can have those puzzles. People might think that this is something which may sound childish, but it's actually not. To reduce anxiety, anxiety is also connected to confidence in my experience. People who have less confidence may have more issues of anxiety. To increase confidence, there is again a psychological theory. Sometimes, when a person is confident, what do? That they have certain postures, they have some gestures, and they have expressions. Right? They are good at they are very good, and they are master of things, and they are confident, they can speak confidently. Another way to increase confidence is, if you're underconfident, at least pretend like you're a confident person. Trust me, within a matter of minutes, you will be confident. which means that is also kind of reverse engineering, if I can say, not exactly. If you are not confident, try using the gestures of a confident person. Bang your fist, bang the table, try to say it with a loud voice. If you are not confident, you will
Affirmations.
become confident. Yes. So this will reduce your anxiety to some extent. So be vocal about things. And usually there are three zones. If I did not talk about this, but there are three zones, especially in our learning levels. One would be a comfort zone, right? Outside the comfort zone, there would be a learning zone. And then after that, there would be a panic zone. So what we should do is then we should not enter into that panic zone. That's what the problem is. That's why we should conduct a SWOT analysis. It might be connected to anxiety again. That you should know what are the threats. You should know what are the weaknesses. Right. There would be something which fall into your panic zone. It's not only about what questions we are talking about. It may also be about what kind of things which we may commit during attempting the examination. It may be time management, which where we are weak at. Right. So you may also need to work at time management. So when I'm talking about SWOT, it may not be only topic or subject related. Actually, it can be for your attributes also, right? Your body functions, maybe your sleeping pattern. It can be anything. Actually, generally, you should do your SWOT analysis. Maybe you are overreacting, you're overzealous, you are premature in your answering your questions. You have to identify what exactly you're doing wrong. That's where the buddy system helps. I usually say that you have to have a buddy who is going to tell you what you're doing wrong, because you cannot find your own mistakes. Right. You should know about yourself in very short, I should say.
Yeah. So, Kunal, to attack your anxiety issue, perhaps you have to find out what you're anxious about. Like he said, is it time management or is it
Yes.
knowledge of a subject, particularly, let's say
Yes.
maths would make me anxious. So,
That's
that's your
true.
weakness. So, they're going back to the SWOT analysis. So, you just have to develop that. Yeah.
See,
Yeah.
uh,
So, that's
I'm
how, just
not
simplify
into.
it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. In fact, I think I would
Yeah,
have
it's not
said
like, oh
one.
my God, I have anxiety issues and you ended
Yes,
at that. No, no.
yes,
Just
yes,
go, like step by
yes.
step, understand why
Exactly,
anxious, why
exactly.
anxiety.
So
Yeah.
it should also be part of SWOT analysis. In fact, why,
Yeah,
what you're worried about,
absolutely.
why you're worried
Absolutely.
about. In
Absolutely.
fact,
And
I
affirmations I
usually,
really liked.
yeah, I usually tell people that with mathematics. I mean, personally, I was not good with mathematics. I mean,
Me
it's not that
neither.
I chose law because I was bad at mathematics. I always wanted to pursue law, but incidentally, I was also bad at mathematics. So I actually did not focus much on mathematics. I only found out what I was good in mathematics. Few things. I stuck to that. I scored 12 out of 20. I was more than happy. Right. In Toto, I scored 148. That was sorry 138. At that time it was good enough to land me a good NLU. Now the competition is higher, and again depends upon what is the difficulty level of a question paper and how many people are appearing for. So again, I think people should know their limits. That is very important in this case. When they are having anxiety issues, I think they should know their limits. Don't unnecessarily push. If you're not good at mathematics, just leave it. I used to suck at mathematics, trust me.
Yeah, we had a guest who actually mentioned that he actually left all the maths questions, and this time I think it's
Fine.
even lesser. Yeah, the
Yeah,
new
yeah,
pattern. Yeah. So good for those
yeah,
people.
definitely.
Great.
Mm,
Fantastic. I really enjoyed the session. Ayush, thank you so much for
I
taking
hope
the
so.
time and covering this topic. Yes, it was really, really interesting.
Okay, I hope
And
to
for
again. Yeah, yeah, sure. You were saying, sorry, I interrupted.
so we might come back to you for another topic
Sure,
sometime.
sure,
Just
sure. Definitely.
and
Again, all the best to all the listeners and who would be listening at the later stage.
you
I I hope this might help you, even if 10%. I think I have succeeded in my endeavor here. And I implore you to try those things, even if, let's say, while you are listening, it might have been boring, but while you're doing it, might actually help you. So please try those. If it is a failure, I think you can blame it on me later.
and it's the method doesn't fail. The person might at doing at that. Yeah. So method is absolutely tried and tested by many.
Yeah,
So please, I think everybody should try these things. And
sure.
any feedback if from the audience, if anybody wants to put it in the chat box, please feel free to do that. Any more questions? One quick one, if we can take, please feel
Yeah,
free
why
to.
not?
Yeah. And any other topics that you would like to hear, maybe in next
Yeah.
webinars you would like us to take up, please put it in the chat box. We are all ears. Yeah. Thank you for joining,
Okay.
taking the time. Thank you, Ayush.
Thank you so
Thank you very
much.
much.
Good
Bye.
night, everyone.
Bye.